I hope you got your list of things you'll need to take this course.
Your marble apple and your stapler. Very essential to learn comedy.
I was talking to some students and they were saying things like, how do I get an agent? Where do I get my headshots? And I just thought, shouldn't the first thing you're thinking about is how do I be good? I have a little bit of a pet peeve for comedians who come out and say, how are we doing tonight? You've blown one of the most important moments of your show. Say, I'm sorry, we're out of the front. Sorry, we're out of the front. What? We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about my specific process. Thank you. Performing comedy. Hey, move that over there. We're going to talk about writing. Editing is one of your most powerful tools. So that bit's not working. It's gone the next night.
Now, what gets the laugh? Whenever it's the word fucked that gets the laugh, I always question it.
An ultimate goal of mine is to work clean.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you should take out fucked up.
Yeah.
I never actually thought I was funny. You may think I don't have any talent. I guarantee you, I had no talent. None. Remember, you are a thought machine. Everything you see, hear, experience is usable. Oh, what? Oh. Whatever makes you unique as a performer, do it. And know that there's room for you. Hey, welcome to Steve Martin's Masterclass. Huh?
All right, good afternoon. My name is Mark Williamson. I'm the CEO of Masterclass. As you can see, Masterclass, we get the best in the world to teach their craft. So whether that's Steph Curry teaching basketball, Martin Scorsese teaching filmmaking, Annie Leibovitz teaching photography, or Helen Mirren teaching acting, we want to make it accessible to everybody in the world to learn from the best. And one of the things I want to share about Masterclass today, before we talk about the future of education, I want to talk a little bit about the roots of how Masterclass came about. So Masterclass was an idea that came from David Rogier, our founder and CEO. And it actually was inspired by an experience David had when he was 8 years old with his grandmother. David's grandmother actually helped raise him. So one day when he was 8 years old, he came home from school and was complaining about how much math homework he had. And so David's grandmother sat him down and said, David, I want to tell you a story. And this story inspired David and really stuck with him for years, so I want to try to retell it now. She told David about when she was growing up in Krakow, Poland, that her mother and father were getting ready to take a vacation. But her father had to stick around for a few extra days to do some work. So her mother and her left early to go on their vacation, and while they were gone, the Nazis invaded Poland. They took everything from their family, they killed her father, and they fled to the States. They lived in New York City for a number of years, and she began working in a factory after finishing up school. She really wanted to be a doctor. She had this dream of being a doctor, so she went off and applied to 50 medical schools and got rejected from every single one of them. Later on, the following year, she applied to 50 medical schools again, and once again got rejected from all of them. She told David how she picked up the phone and started calling the admissions director for all these medical schools. And only one person answered the phone and would take the call, and basically told her that she had 3 strikes against her. She was a woman, she was foreign, and she was Jewish. And he hung up the phone on her. It didn't deter her. She still applied to medical school the following year, all 50 schools again, and got into one school. And she went on to build a medical practice that was really successful. And so David, you can imagine an 8-year-old hearing this story. This is a pretty intense story to be hearing when you're 8 years old. And she said, the grandmother said to him, David, I want something to be clear for you. If it's not clear, education is the only thing in the world that somebody can't take away from you. And so that story really stuck with him and inspired him to think about Masterclass when he was thinking about what type of business he wanted to build. And at Masterclass, we want to build a company where everybody in the world has access to the best minds, to the people who really understand their craft the best. And we want to make that affordable and accessible to everybody. So right now, you can buy a Masterclass from all the people I mentioned But you can buy an individual class, but you can also get access to all of them. So for less than 50 cents a day, so for $180 a year, you can buy an all-access pass where you can get access to all of the instructors. So we're trying to bring the world's best teachers in an incredible kind of online learning environment and make it accessible to everybody in the world. And we actually do think a lot about kind of our 100-year plan at Masterclass, because the world of education is changing, and the world's not the same as it used to be. It's changing incredibly quickly, and we all need to be lifelong learners and developing new skills to be productive members of society. And so whether the future of education is AR or VR or knowledge somehow getting implanted in our brains through technology, Masterclass, we want to make sure that the best in the world can be a part of teaching their craft to everybody and passing on their legacy. And so to make this a little bit more of an interactive conversation, I'm going to ask Eric from IVP to come up on stage and join me. He's one of our investors in Masterclass, and we're going to have a little bit of a dialogue, kind of Q&A, and talk about education and the future of education. Come on up, Eric. All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mark, for having me join you. We invested in, we're investors in Masterclass, so clearly we're believers in the mission, but I thought, maybe we can just have a dialogue and help share some of the, things that get us all excited. And I can't help but think that while we're talking about the future here, because this is the World's Fair Nano, that it's worth thinking about actually how learning was distilled throughout time. I think, we started, if you go back, with stone tablets, and we started with paintings on walls in caves, and then scrolls, and writing on paper of sorts. And I think the printing press really changed the way that knowledge was shared and disseminated. And I actually, at the risk of putting words in your mouth, think that Masterclass can be potentially as influential as the printing press because of the way that you share information from the world's greats. I mean, it used to be Aristotle could teach but to 10 people around and only in a small part of the world. And so as you think about how Masterclass takes advantage of all these digital platforms, online, mobile, apps, where does this go from here? Do we have a world where we have holograms teaching us? Do we put on AR or VR headsets to try and have this sort of pseudo one-on-one interaction? Just talk a little about that and how you see education going from here.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, technology has played a huge role in advancing education over the centuries. Believe it or not, it was only back in the 1400s that the printing press was created, roughly 1450. And so prior to that, that means that if you wanted to learn, you would typically learn by having somebody pass down their craft to you. So almost kind of a master to an apprentice type model. And one of the things that we're super excited about is instead of making that kind of a one-to-one relationship or a master to maybe 5 or 10 apprentices, trying to get the best in the world to teach to everybody. And we think that can be really as impactful, if not even more impactful. And when we image out in the future, there's some technology that's right in front of us that's just years away from having a huge impact on education. There's actually a booth here today where they're showing how VR can help train doctors do complicated surgeries. We internally oftentimes have conversations around what environments would AR or VR be incredibly impactful on an education experience. So sometimes I imagine standing in my kitchen and maybe I'm taking a class from Gordon Ramsay on how to cook, and maybe I'm wearing AR glasses and it's showing me exactly the difference on how to mince versus how to chop certain ingredients. Or you can imagine wearing VR goggles and learning sports. I used to play football, so a dream for me would be, could I put on VR goggles and have Peyton Manning or Tom Brady kind of tell me what do they see out in front of them when they're about to start a play. And so when I think about the potential just in the near term, and we're just talking about 3-5 years in front of us, that stuff is super exciting, much less a future where if you're Elon Musk and you're thinking about Neuralink or other ways to get information directly into the brain, I have no doubt that there's going to be huge opportunities for technology to accelerate the rate at which we all learn.
And we talked a little about the technology, maybe a little bit about the words education and learning, because I think for many of us, when you hear the word education or you hear learning, you may flash back to having too much math homework like David, or thinking about the last time you took an exam and you were incredibly happy that was going to be the last time, but yet here we are talking about education and it is learning, but it's in a different vein. There are tests, but only if you want to take them. There's homework, but only if you want to do it. Maybe give a sense for how you and David and the company think about this concept of lifelong learning.
Yeah, so we're obviously huge believers in the fact that we all need to be lifelong learners. And we want to create an environment where people can really be inspired to learn about new topics and in new areas. And one of the questions that's really interesting we get all the time is, are master classes, kind of entertaining, or are they educational? And I actually think that's a total false dichotomy. Something doesn't need to be either entertaining or educational. It can be both. Like, why can't we learn in a fun environment and really enjoy the content that we're learning? And so we spend a lot of time trying to create that experience, an immersive experience where you're learning from the best. That's really fun. And if you're somebody who says, oh my God, this is a topic I want to learn more about, I want to get deeper into, we're going to give you the tools and opportunities to do that. I was telling the story backstage to somebody. I was watching, we have a class from Garry Kasparov to teach chess. I played chess as a kid against my dad, and I was watching the class at our kitchen table, and my daughter, Sam, came walking by, and she's like, hey, do you want to play chess? And I was like, sure. And over the last 3 weeks, we've actually started playing chess together. So, and I've been taking more and more of the class. I've been interested in it, and it's kind of pushed me down this path I didn't expect to get into, which is chess. But it's also
so Sam, does that mean that you're beating him now? Yeah? No, not yet. A couple more classes and you'll have him.
Yeah. She'll be able to beat me in about 3 or 4 weeks, I think. But it's also created this opportunity it's like an enriching life for me. And the more that we know, and the more we can connect with other people around their passions and their interests, it does create a new way to bond with folks too.
And maybe to take it down further to something that's more masterclass specific, a lot of times people will ask, as they see the roster of instructors and they truly are the best in their field, whether you particularly enjoy their field or not, it's hard to argue that Gordon Ramsay isn't great isn't a great chef, or Steph Curry obviously is very good at basketball, Serena Williams is fantastic at tennis, or obviously Garry Kasparov. What's the magic that has enabled the company to really recruit this roster of teachers from all ages and fields?
Yeah, I think the really incredibly hard thing that I was amazed that David pulled off was getting that first set of instructors to say yes. So you can imagine you're a startup in Silicon Valley, you've got no name recognition, you're trying to get the best in the world to work with you. Why on earth would they believe that you'll do a good job and represent them in the right light? And David just did an amazing job of getting people to say yes. And the other thing that the company spent a lot of time working on, and we've gotten really good at, is helping these masters share their genius in a way that's approachable to everybody. So whether or not you haven't played chess in 30 years with your father, you can still start a Garry Kasparov class as basically a beginner, learn from it, and then kind of put you on this deeper learning path where you're actually really learning new material. Or honestly, I'm not going to become an actor, but I can take a class from Helen Mirren or Samuel Jackson and just better understand this profession that we all run into all the time. We all consume media in some way, and so it's just super interesting. And the other thing that we do to help the instructors do that is we spend a lot of time with them working through the curriculum of the class to make sure that it's representative of them and what they want to teach and how they want to share their craft. And really, what's come out of that is something that's approachable to everybody from professional actors or professional directors or to people who are just curious about it. One of my favorite tweets of all time came from the director of Star Wars. So Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, while he was filming Star Wars, actually tweeted out that he was taking the Werner Herzog class from Masterclass while he was directing Star Wars. So you have even the best people in the world who are amazing at their craft, who still want to learn from the other best people in the world. So it doesn't matter if you're a newbie or an expert, people want to learn.
And then you hit on something I was hoping that came out, or something came out that I was hoping you'd hit on, which is how you translate the experience that people who are really good at doing something, and how you take that and actually make sure that they're actually good at teaching something. Because people who are good at doing things may just have instinctive talent, or they're naturally skilled at something, but then to try and convey that to someone who maybe comes from a different background isn't always the easiest thing to do. And I'm curious how you guys have sort of made that more of a formula, because I think it's actually applicable to everyone here. They're all things that we are good at. They're all things that we can teach to people around us as well, whether they're kids, family members, friends. And so I think that's a big theme for this future of learning in my mind.
Yeah, so one of the things we'll do is when we start working with some of these just incredible folks and their talents, is we'll have conversations with them around what they want to teach. We'll make sure that they're comfortable kind of breaking down their process. One of the favorite things we heard back from one of our instructors is a guy named Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward's probably the greatest journalist of our generation. I mean, just an incredible journalist. And he mentioned that in the process of actually teaching a masterclass, of going through his curriculum and thinking about how does he break down his process, that he actually learned a lot about himself and about how he actually works. And so even for him, it was a bit of a learning experience. But we always make sure that these folks are able to kind of break down their process and share it in a way that's approachable for everybody. Because Serena Williams, who teaches a class on tennis for us, obviously started playing tennis when she was like 3 or 4 years old. So much of that is probably instinctual for her, but she is able to actually really like break it down and share how she learns and how she developed so that newbie tennis players can get better.
And maybe, I know we've talked a lot in the future about potentially down the line, the next person who teaches a basketball class could do so in an AR or VR setting, or have, Tom Brady or someone could teach a quarterback or football class. But actually, one of the things that I love about where we are today is that we do have things like Reddit and chat rooms, things like that has allowed the instructors to engage in their audience. And how do you see that sort of back and forth improving both the student experience as well as what instructors are delivering now?
Yeah, so one of the things that's amazing about, again, let's contrast the past to today and then the future even more. So the past, Aristotle's got some apprentices, maybe it's 5 or 10 people. Today, we can get the best in the world to share their knowledge online with just about everybody. And one of the other things we do today is we'll create an environment where students can interact directly with those instructors. So just a couple of weeks after Annie Leibovitz launched her photography class with us, she joined her students in an online conversation. It was almost like kind of a Skype-mediated conversation where she's answering their questions in real time. And so it's another way where you can kind of scale up an experience instead of 1 to 10 to 1 to millions of people is through technology. And so, like I mentioned, so Annie did that conversation. We've got other people who will do an AMA on Reddit. So for example, Jane Goodall teaches a class on conservationism and the importance of taking care of the environment. She did an AMA on Reddit to help share some of the things with her class. And so as technology allows us and empowers more people across the globe to have access to information, that will enable us to create direct connections between our instructors and students. And one of the amazing things is that it doesn't matter where in the world you live. You can be a child in sub-Saharan Africa, you could be in Asia, you could be in the US, you could be in Brazil, and you have the same access to the greatest minds. And that's something that's really important to us. We do think a lot about democratizing access. We want it to be available to everybody. And so we're doing that today through some of the mediums we talked about, and we're super excited about doing that in the future through additional technology mediums as they come about.
Well, awesome. I think we are almost out of time. I don't know if I'm allowed to take questions, but does anyone have a question or want to throw out a subject that Mark can work on to make the next class something that everyone else wants to see?
Yeah, don't be shy. In the back. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, great. So let me repeat the question so that everybody heard it. The question was, hey, 50 cents a day is actually fairly cheap for her here in the US, but that's actually not cheap for everybody around the world. And that's exactly right. And so there's a bunch that we think about with respect to making it accessible to everybody in the world. So today, we have a product called All Access Pass. That's the subscription product I mentioned, which for $180 a year gives you access to everybody. At some point in time in the future, we haven't done this yet, but we're going to think more and more about pricing specifically to different geographies to try to help meet the needs of those countries where 50 cents a day might be the equivalent of their entire wage or a large percentage of it. So there's some differential pricing things we can do, and we're constantly looking for opportunities to work with less advantaged populations. So whether that's students in schools where they just have less money and less accessibility to this type of technology, we really do want to find ways to make it affordable to everybody.
Yeah, I would just point that out. I mean, this instructor doesn't want to be named because the gesture wasn't done so for the sake of publicity, but there was one of our instructors that waived the rights to collect any fees and gave away tens of thousands of passes to students because this particular instructor did want to have that knowledge be disseminated. So I think we'll probably see and hopefully see more of that as time goes on. And you have to keep in mind, this company's been around for, I think, 3 years, and I'm really impressed by what they've done, but I think we're just at the beginning, given everything we're talking about today. So, and I think we're definitely getting the hook now. So thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Woo! Give it up again for Mark. Thanks, Eric.